Hey everybody, welcome and thanks so much for joining us. On today's episode of conventioNOT, we feature Rob Oliver of yourmotivationalspeaker.com. Rob is a presenter, a speaker, a multi-time best-selling author, a father, a husband, and he also happens to use a wheelchair. I mentioned that last one only because it comes up quite a bit in our conversation today. It comes up as Rob's means to affect the world. In his own words, by no means is he confined to that device. He refers to that device as what has opened him up and given him an opportunity to connect with much of the world. I have no doubt that Rob is exceptional at what he does. In speaking with him today in a fairly brief conversation, he was able to completely change my outlook on the rest of my day. I really couldn't ask for a better gift from Rob, and I'm really excited to share him with you. Sit back, relax, get to know Rob Oliver on conventioNOT. Thank
Beautiful.
God.
There we are.
Hi, Rob.
Hey,
It's very nice to meet you. Like I said, it's not the most gracious introduction when you got to stumble through some technical difficulties, but
hey, listen, here's where I come from, and that is being flawed is what makes us human, and it's what unites us all. And if you never made any mistakes, you would never learn from them.
see, I love this guy already. He's patient. That's a required quality in our guests.
Yeah, there is a sentiment of like everything I'm not makes me everything I am, right? It's always kind of something I've identified with a little bit. One thing we are not good at, and a few of our guests could attest to, as everybody starts to tune in and listen to Rob Oliver, our guest today, is that upstart of technology has been over the year and a half we've been doing this. It's certainly been let's call it a learning experience. It's a practice more than a science.
Yeah, well, if you ever want to feel really stupid, then tell your teenagers about the technical problems that you're having, and they're like, "Yeah, Dad, all you got to do is," and then like 2 seconds later, literally everything has been fixed and remedied, and it all works.
The first 20-year-old we have on here is within 3 minutes, he's just going to be like, man, I don't got time for this. Like, these guys can't even figure out Zoom. Like, I don't know how they have done anything with their lives.
Yeah,
Well, hopefully our content speaks otherwise.
I'm starting to understand how my grandparents felt. Like my grandparents were born in the early 1900s, and so they're experiencing like computers and cell phones and all this kind of stuff, and this is stuff that wasn't even dreamed of when they were little. Although, listen, I feel like I got ripped off, and here's why. When I was a kid, I was born in the 70s, so growing up in the 80s, by the time that we got to the year 2000, we were all supposed to have rocket cars, and we were supposed to live like George Jetson. And
Back to the Future and the Jetsons really screwed us up, right? Like I thought that was gospel. At least the hoverboard, I figured was a given. I mean, those fancy Nike auto lace ups, Ryan. They came out with those just a couple years ago,
yeah,
right?
you could buy those. They just hit the market in 2020. So I got, fantasy was a quarter century late, just in maybe a couple of those things.
Yeah. They're just lagging. They're just lagging. We need to give it a 20-year buffer. Can we allow you, Mr. Oliver, Rob Oliver? You have a very dynamic and diverse background, and I would love for all of our guests to just sit back, relax, and get to know you. But can you give yourself a proper introduction instead of counting on our mangling of your biography?
Okay, listen, the reason why I send an autobiography or a biography and an introduction to other people is because I hate talking about myself. So here's what I do. I'm a guy who I like to tell stories. And that has branched me out into becoming a motivational speaker. And as well, I've written several books, and which are all autobiographical. I've actually done a kids anti-bullying book as well. And those have become bestsellers on Amazon, which is kind of fun and cool. And I'm from Pittsburgh, and my great pride in being from Pittsburgh is that when my motivational speaking business was going from being more than just a side hustle to being more of a main gig, I was actually recognized as the top ranked motivational speaker in Pittsburgh for 2 consecutive years, which was really cool. But all that being said, that I more identify myself as a husband and as a dad, and that's who I am. Am I allowed to just opine for 1 quick minute?
You're allowed to do whatever you want.
Okay. So listen, I have a spinal cord injury. I am paralyzed from the chest down with limited use of my arms and hands. And so I am a person with a disability. That's, and there is a whole backstory on how we came up with person first language, which is referring to someone as a person with a disability instead of referring to them as handicapped or disabled. And I could go through the backstory. I'm not going to bore you with it, but the long and short of it is this, that my identity is Rob. That's who I am. I don't identify myself as a person with a disability, as disabled, as handicapped. That is part of my peripheral circumstances. That's my physical condition, but that's not who I am.
Wow. What I don't even know where to begin. You've touched on a lot of things that really just have a real deep rooted part in my passions and my interests. So I'm not going to dive too deep into that. I'm going to stay on the surface for now. 4 books, one of them on anti-bullying.
Yes. So when I was in 1st grade, I had a kid that was picking on me. And it turns out my best friend, and I mean my lifelong best friend, was in 1st grade with me. And I told him, like, hey, this kid's giving me a hard time. And within a week, it stopped. And I was pretty happy about that. And I mentioned it to my friend, like, hey, this guy stopped bothering me. And he's like, yeah, I talked to him. Which means he took him out in the schoolyard and he beat the snot out of him. And said, if you ever touch him again, I will do this all over. And surprisingly enough, I never had a problem with getting bullied after that. But unfortunately, my friend developed prostate cancer just over 10 years ago, and he passed away about 3 years ago.
Okay.
And I mean, this is a guy who, like I said, we're in 1st grade together. We married 2 girls that are friends, and we lived across the street from each other. Like, this is a guy who's been part of my whole life. So
Absolutely.
When I had this concept of doing an anti-bullying book, I decided to make it, a picture book. And it's got the anti-bullying, it's got the little story that goes at the bottom of the page. But I decided to feature 2 of his sons as part of the main characters in the book.
Okay.
And I thought it's a really important message. This is a guy who helped me with being bullied. And I'm taking part of the proceeds of those anti-bullying books and putting them into a college fund for his kids. So just trying not only to share a good message, but to do a good thing for some kids that have, had a rough time.
So
I know. Sorry, just real quick, if you could plug that book so I can Google it, Rob.
Yes. The book is called Who, Me, Yeah, You.
Okay.
Who,
Sorry,
Me,
Ryan,
Yeah,
go
You.
on.
And so you mentioned earlier when we first started talking that most of at least your published books are autobiographical. Is this book autobiographical and you use the kids, or did you kind of pivot away from your typical style that way?
No, yeah, this one isn't really autobiographical. And I just did the thing there that I hate the most in language. It's where I answer a question with a no and a yes at the same time, which, like, is it yes or is it no? Anyway, no, this one is not autobiographical at all. It doesn't tell my story. It is something, though, that it's a topic that I'm passionate about. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that is that as a person with a disability, so many times I am looked at as being less than, and I'm not given the same opportunity. And people with disabilities so often have their power taken away from them by other people. And that's really what bullying is. It's taking away somebody else's power, taking away their value and their worth. And so it wasn't just important to me because I had been bullied, but it's important to me as a person with a disability to really, don't know what the word is I'm looking for, to convince, to encourage, to put people out there to say, you know what, when you see this happening, it's time for you to stand up and say something. Because that's really what's most important about bullying. The statistics will show you that every 7 seconds, a kid on a playground in America is being bullied. And now that the numbers may have gone down because of COVID, but it's just a fact. Now we've got cyberbullying, we've got all that kind of stuff. The other statistics will show you though, that I think the number is like 78% of cases, when somebody speaks up and says this isn't right, the bullying stops within 30 seconds.
That's it. It's that effective.
Yep.
What an important statistic to combine those two things, because I was pretty fortunate. I don't think that I was like absent from bullying, but I do think that like it didn't hit me maybe the same way that it hit even people in my family. And so I think that second sentence is an important sentence, Rob, because a lot of people feel some kind of a certain way, which is part of the root problem about that like bullying subject, right? Like it gets typecast, or it gets like, I feel a certain way about bullying as an adult based on the way that I experienced that as a child. And it's kind of unique in some ways that it took us 5 years of like, a real focus on bullying to unravel it that way. So it really makes me excited to hear people talk about things like that and be able to share the details of like, from 30 seconds perspective, you could
The statistics. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know we weren't recording that in the 80s, right? I mean, we didn't really even care in the 90s. So it's been a pretty fresh topic of concern in how quickly they've like Ryan said, kind of quantified it. And I love that sentence. You're saying this is a huge problem, but unlike most of our huge problems, I'm not calling this a simple answer, but it's a lot easier than some of the tasks we're currently faced with as a society right now, right? Like,
Yes.
hey, I don't know what to do. I just know that ain't right. And 3% of the time, that's it. That's the solution right there. It's just, hey, just drawing attention to it actually solves this problem. That's a lucky one. That's an easy one. We just needed to be aware of it and kind of make some efforts towards it.
Let you err on the side of action instead of on the side of not doing something, because you could be confident. It's more than twice as likely that you could affect it positively than negatively in that way.
Yeah, the number of people that say that they have been bullied at some point, I've seen all kinds of different studies, and that number goes anywhere from like 20 to 35%, sometimes higher, of people that have experienced bullying.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And I don't have the exact number on the top of my head right now, but I think the number is close between 85 and 90% of all school students say that they have witnessed bullying. And that's actually the group that I want to talk to, the group that says, I've seen it, mm-hmm. and say, you can do something about it. And that's really where the title of the book comes from, to say, it's time for you to stand up against bullying. Who, me? Yeah, you. Exactly. I mean, I had a lot of fun with the book. It was a creative idea for me that the whole book rhymes. Okay. It's written as a poem, and all of the odd numbered pages end with the phrase, who, me? Yeah, you. And so I encourage parents, as they're reading the book with their kids, is get them to ask the who, me question and then answer it with a, yeah, you, especially because when you get to the end of the book and it says like, it's time for you to stand up and take a stand against bullying. And the child asks, who, me? And the parent is reminding them, yeah, you.
That sounds like something that would be really cool to consume. We keep saying on all of our podcasts, you probably do too, during the COVID, right? Like it used to be, because our shows is episodic, that we try to not mention COVID, but that was months ago. And so as we start to redefine what education is going to be, and like, look, everybody's going to have to go back to school somehow. I feel like for our parents that are out there that are listening to us, because our demographic does skew, certainly with a lot of folks with young kids, I feel like that type of a message is something that you could share together when you have some extra time to like pre-teach, right? because it is such a subject that affects 35 to 40%. If 35 to 40% of us were harmed, I mean, there's no secret that there is such a harm from bullying. If 35 to 40% of us were harmed physically in grade school, could we imagine the way that we would respond?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, and so we would be ousting whatever those items are that permit the kids to be harmed that way.
Hopefully. Yeah.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
And I want to key on one other thing that you said, talking about adults looking at bullying. And like I do a lot of speaking in schools about bullying. And without fail, when I talk about it, I have at least one, usually more than one teacher come up to me afterwards to say, what you talked about resonates with me, because I remember when I was in fill in the blank grade, this is what happened to me. And I'm talking about teachers who are sometimes in their 60s, and they're remembering what happened to them when they were in single digits, when they were in elementary school, second, third, fourth grade. And that's very powerful in the message that it gives me. And that is, this is something that has a lifelong impact.
Hey, most interruptions in most podcasts are to tell you to do something. I guess Mike and I have done our fair share of those when we interrupt our own show. One of the things I want to do is just thank you for listening. We really appreciate each and every one of the downloads, and we work really hard to bring the show and find guests and experts who can validate what they're talking about. Keep listening. Thanks again, and stay safe.
Yeah. You stick, I hate to say it, but I remember the first and last name, the area of the hallway. I only got my book spiked. Remember that? That was, I don't know if they still do that, but
that's
like
a 90s term, 80s.
getting
90s
your
term.
book spiked in middle school was a real thing. And I was very fortunate when I was young. I played a lot of sports. So I was pretty good at them. I had some older friends that normally protected me from those kind of stereotypical bullying type things. But I have a very distinct memory of a handful of circumstances where I was bullied. And yeah, at this point, is it traumatic? No, but I don't think it's fading. It still holds a very, very strong part of my memory bank.
It elicits a very strong emotional response because you get that understanding that your power was taken away. You felt powerless and someone else held power over you. And it's a very, very difficult place to be. So one of the things that I share with kids is, we get a dollar bill and you say, what's it worth? Obviously it's worth $1. If we call it a quarter, what's it worth? It's still worth $1. So what people say about you doesn't change your value. If we take it and we crumple it up, what's it worth? It's worth $1. But then to get one of the kids to come up with, somebody has crumpled the dollar bill all up, and now go ahead, smooth it out and do what you can. The problem is once that bill is crumpled up, you can never get it back into its original condition. It will always carry those wrinkles with it. It will always carry the reminder of that traumatic experience that it went through. And that's kind of what I really want to impress on the kids, A, that are doing the bullying. Like, this, what you're doing will have a lasting impact. And B, on the kids that see it, to say, if you stand up, you can help someone to not have those scars, not have those burdens that they carry for the rest of their life.
You actually can make a lasting, it's kind of hard to impress upon a third grader that you can change someone's life, but they can. They absolutely, just like your buddy in first grade, right? I mean, that he was your hero for forever. I mean, I'm sorry, I don't mean to use that phrase for you, but the way you spoke of him and the way you kind of represented him, I can see the place he still holds in your heart and in your mind.
Yeah, absolutely. He was my best friend. And I hope that nobody is going to go somewhere and try and guess my password. But, even though he passed away a few years ago, like when you have to, those security questions that ask you, what's the name of your best friend? His name goes in there because that's the place he
No-brainer.
will always have in my heart.
Yeah. Well, just a beautiful tribute to him that you were able to put that out there. I mean, an audacious pursuit of yours. I don't think any of your other books were children's books. And Rob, I mean, that subject alone is pretty heavy. To wade into those waters takes a lot of courage. So for you to put it out on an, international public scale like that it's really commendable. I love that. I can see that that's kind of taken over probably a lot of your, like you said, you turned some of this from a hustle into a regular. I mean, you're speaking when schools were active. How often are you getting engaged in that?
So it's really kind of a difficult thing for me because I'll back up to say, when I was in college, I went to the career counseling center and I'm like, hey, I am interested in everything. Like, give me a test that tells me what should I major in, because like everything that I enjoy learning about stuff. So like, give me a test and that will help me understand what I should major in. So they gave me like the interest inventory profile. And I was so excited because the results came back. I sit down with my counselor and she opens up the folder and she looks at the paper and her eyes get wide and she shakes her head and she's like, I have never seen anyone
Good
with
luck.
such a diverse array of interests. And I'm like, wait,
Like that does not help me. Yeah.
okay, I think that's what I told you in the first place.
Right.
So there are, bullying is something that I am obviously passionate about, but as well, because of my disability, I spend a lot more time in healthcare than I would like to. And so I do a lot of speaking to medical professionals and medical associations about quality healthcare from a patient's perspective, to talk to them about how do you make this experience something that is a collaboration. So the name of it is Robology, okay? And Robology obviously is the study of Rob. And what I'm trying to tell them is when I go in here, I am an expert in me and you have an expert in medicine. But if we don't respect each other's expertise, we're not going to come to a mutually agreeable and mutually functional diagnosis, not diagnosis, but treatment plan.
Sure.
And if the treatment plan isn't something that actually works for both of us, then it's not going to be adhered to and it's not going to be effective. So I do speaking for medical organizations and then basically telling my story about like how I acquired my disability and coming to understand that life is difficult. Everybody's got problems. Everybody's got limitations. And the ability to succeed in life comes from whether you're focusing on what's missing or you're focusing on what you've got. Mm-hmm. That's really the ultimate difference. So I get to speak on a variety of topics and each one ignites a different area of passion for me. Oh, and to answer your question, anywhere from 40 to 60 times a year, I'm speaking in different venues and different places.
Wow. That is, that's more than a little side gig. Honestly, I don't care what you're talking about. If you can get 40 to 60 audiences a year, I mean, I don't even know if my wife listens to me that often throughout a year.
Yeah,
that's incredible, man.
It's fun. And it's also, what I have found is that, what really resonates with people is talking about, honestly, about the fact that life is hard. Because that is, and I think this is where we started, right? Like adapting to new technology, it's hard. And dealing with new stuff, it's not easy, and you mess up and it doesn't work right. And you have the one platform and you get conflict and it's like, it didn't go how I planned it.
Yeah.
But even though it didn't go how you planned it, it's something that you learn from it. And the next time you're going to try and figure out, okay, how do we make sure this doesn't happen next time? And so my first book was called Still Walking. And it was the concept of life is a journey. And even though I am now experiencing limitations. I am still walking on the journey of life. That's my outlook. My friend said to me, like, hey, does everything always work out for you? Because your book was really positive, but like, don't you have anything that doesn't ever work for you? And so okay. So I figured I need to write a sequel, and the sequel was called Still Falling. And the idea is that a positive outlook and, a good attitude won't prevent you from tipping your wheelchair over in the middle of the street. Like
It's a balanced lifestyle. Is a positive outlook includes a balanced lifestyle.
It's got to. So, yeah. So, I had a really brilliant point that I was going to say, but then I completely forgot what it was. So, you'll pardon me for that. My only point is that in life, we're going to have those good times, and we're going to have the difficult times. In the difficult times, that is not when character is built, it's when character is revealed.
Sure.
And so building character, having a firm understanding of what you actually believe in is what's going to make the difference. Because when you go through the difficult times, and being human means that you will have difficult times, but in those difficult times, the true essence of who you are is what shines out.
Well, and Rob, like, just speaking to you for, I don't know, how long have we been going here? Has it been 5 minutes or half an hour? I'm not really sure, but like, you got a big smile on your face. You're really charismatic. Like, it's really obvious why you've had the success in what you're doing. Like, the passion is it's clear. I don't think people need a visual. They can hear it through your words. But I do have to ask, I mean, and just like your friend, if you wouldn't mind, we don't need to get into the details, but my curious sense, I do have to understand how you ended up in the wheelchair. Can you touch upon the loss?
Yeah, sure. Let me start off with just a couple quick things. Number one, a lot of times people view it as, or talk about my accident, and I no longer refer to it as an accident. I talk about it as my injury. And you had mentioned kind of the loss, and in some ways, I don't look at it as a loss. I look at it as a refocusing. And so I was 21 years old. I was on the Outer Banks of North Carolina. I was body surfing. I'm assuming you guys know what body surfing is. It's surfing without a surfboard, right? Your body is the board.
Yep.
And instead of the wave carrying me forward, it pushed me down. I hit my head on the bottom and broke my neck at the C5-6 level. And I think I mentioned this earlier, but what that means is I am paralyzed basically from my chest down, and I've got limited use of my arms and hands. So
Gotcha.
like I've got biceps, but not triceps, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And, and that experience at 21 really brought life into focus for me, because I have to understand, like, who am I? What does this mean about me? And a quick story about that. The most powerful message that I got in the whole thing came from my girlfriend at the time. She was on the beach, saw what happened. And when I was able to talk and have a conversation, she was the first person I talked to. I said, listen, I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I don't know exactly what the future holds, but it looks like it holds a lot of limitations. And if that's more than you can handle, if that's intimidating, I understand whatever you need to do to take care of yourself, please do that. And I said, I don't know what you're feeling towards me, but if you're just feeling sorry for me, that's not what I'm looking for in a long-term relationship. And like, don't feel like that you've got to act on that or got to live with that. And I said, lastly, I'm not sure what kind of pressure other people are putting on you to say, like, this is his hour of great need. You can't leave him now. I said, those people aren't a part of us. I said, this is about you and me. And right now it's about you.
Gotcha.
I give you full license to do whatever it is that you need to do to take care of yourself. And she got really mad at me. And with tears in her eyes, she looks at me and she says, listen, what I love about you has nothing to do with whether or not you can walk. I love you for who you are on the inside. And if you think you can get rid of me that easy, you've got another thing coming. So needless to say, I married her, and we've been married 25 years this past December. But that lesson that I learned that day is really powerful and impacting. And it is this, my physical condition does not define me. It is my personality. It is It is my terrible sense of humor. It is the dad jokes. It's my character. All of those things. That's who I am. It's not a paralyzed individual. And that goes back to my original thought that I had shared with you, that this is why I don't see my physical condition as, being a person with a disability. That might be what my condition is, but that's not the crux of the value that I have. That's not actually who I am.
Oh, that is a really beautiful story. Even if nothing else, just about marriage. I'm sorry, but I work so I'm a biomechanist, Rob. So for a living, I testify in court and I analyze incidents, usually where there's some liability and there's some questions about injury causation and things like that. So and I live on the North Shore of Hawaii. So I'm unfortunately far, far, far too familiar with incidents like yours from a very kind of robotic and not personal nature.
Sure.
But for you kind of to illustrate that moment and a 21-year-old on the beach and, your girlfriend at that time, I don't know if you guys had been months dating or years dating, but it's heavy.
We'd been lifelong friends. So I met her when I was like 5 years old. Okay. And we actually just had started dating in February, and the injury happened in August. But it was one of those things that, like, part of the reason why we started dating was because I was thinking about who is my best friend in the world. Okay. So I've got my best friend, Mark, who I already talked about, and he was away at school. And so I didn't get to talk to him as much. And so here's this girl that I talk to on a fairly regular basis. And, I share kind of what's going on in my life. And I'm like, you got to get your stuff together, because who would you rather spend the rest of your life with than somebody that you can talk to about anything that's going on in your life? Someone that you have that kind of connection with. And to use that as the foundation to build a marriage on. And so I asked her out and she said no. But a couple months later, she changed her mind, and then we started dating, and kind of it's been a
persistence. Yeah, that's how you get the good ones. The best ones don't say yes right away. Come on.
Right. And listen, in some ways, my first book, Still Walking, is almost a love letter to her, acknowledging the important role that she plays in my life and what she's done. And she's an amazing person.
Well, I don't think you're doing much without her being a part of it. It's just, I could see that's who you are.
Hey, podcast listener. Thanks for joining today. I'm wondering, is this the type of show that you like to listen to over and over again? If it is, take a second, jump out, subscribe to us on your podcast channel. And if you really dig the show, reach out to us and suggest somebody that you know that we might like to interview. We'd really appreciate it.
That sounds, I don't want to say that sounds charmed, right? In no way experiencing an incident, recovering from an injury both physically, and then living both not just a sustainable existence but a flourishing existence with a life partner. I assume that you said earlier, or you mentioned earlier, you have an 18-year-old kid who seems, I'm sure, going on to something great. Did you go into that body surfing experience as the most positive person, young man? Did you wake up positive, or was there a dark period? I mean, I don't want to get too deep, but have you always been blessed with such a spirit that way?
I don't think that I've always had that. Listen, I as a teenager, I went through some rough times. Some times when I wondered, what's my purpose? Listen, I was a nerd when I was growing up. Okay. I'm not I'm not a jock. I don't have those older friends. I'm the guy who sits by himself with all the rest of the outcasts at lunch. Right. and I'm not sitting at the cool kids table. And it's a struggle to figure, like, where do I fit in here?
Yeah.
I don't. So what I had to come to an understanding of is, who am I and what gives me value? And really, that understanding has shaped where I am today. And the reason for that is, when I was injured, like, I enjoyed playing sports and I enjoyed, physical activity, but that really didn't define who I was. So the fact that now I can't play basketball anymore, I can't play beach volleyball, I can't go rollerblading, those things, okay, I can't do those, but that's not who I am. That doesn't define me. So having that kind of having that, angst as a teenager of having to figure out what is it that makes me me and what is it that gives me value has kind of stuck with me. And even now, I think about it, I've had to come to understand that bias and stigma and prejudice exist. They're in the world. And believe me, all of us have it. I have it too. And
Sure.
it comes into real big focus for me. And part of the reason why I decided to become an entrepreneur was that when I'm going out there and trying to get a job, you guys know, like, I'm reasonably articulate. I'm fairly well spoken. I think that I present okay. I had like a 3.3 in my undergrad. I had a 3.4 in my master's degree. Like, I'm reasonably smart. Like, I'm doing okay here. And I go in and I interview and I think, well, that went well.
Sure.
And I get no call back. I get nothing. Like, not even the crickets. The crickets are ashamed to call me back. Okay. Like, there's nothing happening. And eventually I've got to come to a realization, you know what? Maybe it's not me. Maybe
I got to do this on my own.
Yeah. So what I came to understand is, the people that are doing the interview, they're missing out on what I bring to the table because they see my disability and they don't see me. They have the bias and the stigma and the prejudice that exists. It exists in them, but it doesn't affect my value. It doesn't affect me. And so that's one of the things I think is really important. For me, I say, okay, you're exactly right. I'm going to go do this on my own. I'm going to make my own way. And it's not necessarily I will show them, but it's an opportunity for me to say, listen, I have the value. And the only way for me to maximize my value is to actually believe in myself and to do something with my own capabilities.
So if I can follow up on Ryan's, because I think that's fair. Like, does that incident turn you into someone else? And obviously not necessarily. You had that spirit previously, but like, we've had actually more than one guest that but that has been in the Pittsburgh area for a while. And bear with me here, because it's going to take a minute. But the one thing I know about Pittsburgh, and Ryan and I are both from like suburban Detroit.
You have my condolences.
Yeah, exactly. I was just about to say, what people know about Detroit usually isn't like shiny gold and fancy and pretty. In that sense, though, it's kind of like Pittsburgh, Rob. Like, what I'm getting at is the blue collar nature, like salt to the earth. I've never met people from Pittsburgh, and this is sincere, that I couldn't like have a beer with, get along with. Like, it's just, no, man, I see you. You're being who you are, and there's not a lot of bullshit, which is something that I treasure. I absolutely treasure.
So let me just say, I grew up outside of Philadelphia. So you growing up outside of Detroit, it's not much different. Philadelphia, Detroit, they're both kind of viewed as not the most favorite. It's not LA and it's not New York City, right?
No, and you can't get away with acting like too much of a fool growing up around there, you know?
You could get stabbed by a sports fan from either of those places. Just out of line.
Yep.
Just
both possibilities.
But right, both possibilities.
Okay, so, but in that, so I had the experience of growing up in outside of Philly and then moving to Pittsburgh. And now, keep in mind that the one thing that changed was my injury. So I was still in Philadelphia at the time I was injured. It was a couple years later that I got married because my wife's from out here in Pittsburgh. And when I came to Pittsburgh, I had a different mentality. And my mentality was, it actually developed with kids, because like I'm going to the mall, and when I'm at the mall with my wife is an avid shopper. And like, anyway, for those that don't get the visual of this, I am so totally rolling my eyes at the amount of shopping my wife does, but I digress. All right. So because my wife is an avid shopper, in the early part of our marriage, if I want to spend time with her, you know where I've got to go to spend time with her? I got to go to the mall. Well,
Yep.
at the mall, and like there's these little kids with their mom, and they're like, their eyes are huge, and they're looking at me. And they're like, whoa. And the mom is like, don't look, don't look, right? And right then I realized, you know what? This is a learning opportunity for them. And it's actually, I think, a learning opportunity for the mom too, to say, hey, how's it going? You know, like, and to have a conversation with the kid and to notice something about, you know, like, hey, I like your shoes, or like whatever it is.
Yeah.
That all of a sudden they're having a conversation with me. And even though I'm in a chair, the conversation is actually about them, and we're making a connection on, you know, on a level. And so I want that kid to have the understanding that, you know, the next time I see somebody in a wheelchair, I talk to them, right? And I don't talk to them about their wheelchair. I talk to them about like, hey, that's a really cool shirt you're wearing, or whatever it is. That's where the conversation is, that the wheelchair is not part of that. So that concept carried over for me. I worked downtown Pittsburgh for about 10 years. And so there was, I don't know, like 4 blocks between where my parking garage was and where my office building was. And it was a point of emphasis for me that as I went down the sidewalk, I made sure that I made eye contact with every single person that I approached. And I gave them a head nod and like a how's it going, or a hi, or something along those lines. And the reason for that is because I'm going to make you acknowledge me. I don't want you to feel like you have to look away. I don't want you to feel like, and on top of that, we're just going to make it's, even if it's the most surface of connections, you're going to see like, that's a guy in a wheelchair. That's not a wheelchair. That's a guy.
Wow. What a heavy, I mean, not weight for you to, cause you don't share it in a way that it seems like a burden or a responsibility, but I'm sitting here thinking like, holy shit, is that unfair? You know, that like, that's Rob's goal. He's going to purposely, I hope it was purposely, because 4 blocks is that is a ridiculous distance for any wheelchair user to have to traverse. But yeah, I just love, like you started off, we have a choice in everything. We always have a choice. And you every day wake up and choose, no, I'm gonna be more than this. And like, not just once a day, but constantly. Every time someone wants to look away, there's a person here. Don't be scared. Don't be scared of our differences. There's a person here. And sorry to make that leap, but isn't this kind of what we're all struggling with in society right now? It's just being really bad at like, it's okay. We're all a little bit different. Maybe if we can just start talking about it, eventually maybe we can even talk about the differences, but we don't have to sit back and pretend and like just avoid all this. Like, first things first, eye contact. Like that's a start. Why don't we all just try that? Just once today, make eye contact.
It's just looking at somebody and acknowledging that they are a person. You don't have to be like my kids. It drives them bananas. Okay. Because when they would, you know, like they take your kid to work day and we're walking down the sidewalk and I'm like, how's it going? Hi, what's up?
Oh,
you know,
right.
and they're like,
Oh, your kids are like,
different
stop it,
culture
Dad.
now.
Yeah, like,
yeah.
yeah, like, Dad, stop already. Okay. You're embarrassing us. I'm like, no,
Ah.
this is who I am. This is how I operate. But, to me, yeah, I've got a power wheelchair, so 4 blocks isn't bad at all. And it wasn't bad until it snowed, and then, you know, that was a whole different ball.
You got a whole different set of powers, Rob. Like,
Yeah.
no, man, I love this. I really like, I'm getting so much out of this. I can't wait to check out your books and just kind of follow along a little bit more. This is our excuse for having a podcast. We get to make new friends all the time. Like I got another guy in Pittsburgh. I love it.
Yeah. Well, listen, I feel exactly the same way. I've got my own podcast. It's called Learning from Smart People. And the idea behind it is I want to bring on people that I can learn from, people that have experiences that I don't. And by doing that, I'm going to enrich my own life. I'm going to grow my understanding. There's a quote by a guy, I think his name's J.P. Maroney, and his quote is something along the lines of, when the mind of man is expanded by new thought, it can never retract to its original condition.
I like that.
That is powerful.
Yeah, that's
that is
beautiful.
certainly powerful. Yeah. Well,
Can I
yes.
ask, before we wrap it up, Rye, I do have to ask about
already-
one.
I guess we are that far. Holy crap. I
We
didn't realize
yeah,
it was
no,
so
it
long.
time flies, right? Like
That's
time
amazing.
flies.
Yeah.
And I apologize here, Rob, because I am going to kind of put you in a silo here, but I do have to ask, just given your location, have you and Ryan Shazier, I mean, given your prevalence in the motivational world in your region, is that someone who's, I'm wondering if he's reached out to you. Unfortunately, you've gotten quite apt at this.
I tried to reach out early, but
Okay.
it was one of those things that he was getting so much stuff coming in.
I'm sure.
And I do have a little bit of scarring from a previous experience, okay? And that is, I don't know if you guys remember, there was a Jets player named Dennis Bird who
Yeah.
broke his neck on the field of play.
Yeah.
And they told him he's never going to walk again. And he wrote,
Mhm.
was his book like Rise Up and Walk or something?
think-
read
yeah,
that
I was
book
gonna
in,
say.
like maybe early college or like high school.
Right.
Yep.
And so-
Rise Up. Yeah.
His message was about perseverance, okay? And so he's got this spinal cord injury and they tell him you're not going to walk, and he says, I'm not going to accept that. And he wills himself to work out and to do everything that he needs to, and he literally walks out of rehab. And so that book was around the same time of my injury, and
Okay.
somebody got me an autographed copy of it, and I was like, that was really cool. But it was really hard for me, because here I am and I'm like, okay, great. I'm a person of faith. I'm praying that this will get fixed. And I'm reading about this and it's will and determination and like, okay, I'm going to do this. The problem is that the nerves in my neck are cut. And no matter how determined I am, I can't regrow those nerves, and I'm not going to be able to get up out of this wheelchair. So Ryan Shazier is doing amazing things. And so I have not connected with him. And part of it is because he's got an incomplete injury and he's able to do things that I'm not able to do. And so in that way, I'm not sure how much of my experience would be beneficial for him.
Okay.
And so, but yeah, no, I've tried to reach out to him, and the connection hasn't happened. Although I'd love to talk to him, and
I hate to say it, but it's Mr. Shazier's loss. I have no, and the reality is like you said, okay, he got a million people coming at him from all different directions. I know that, Rob, you're able to connect with a lot of other people who need it. And it really warms my heart that you're doing what you're doing. I mean, and we've covered a variety of subjects here, but they've all been Rob Oliver, which is it's really beautiful. We just went over an hour of things that you're doing, that you're passionate about, and they're all positive, supporting things, and we all need more of it. So I'm just so appreciative you took the time to chat with us today, Rob.
And it's my honor. I'm really happy that you guys were willing to have me on. And I will say, one of the things that you guys mentioned earlier on was it's about choices. It's about what you choose to focus on. It's about what you choose to put your efforts into. It's about the choices that you make. I crash every now and then. And sometimes it's like, this is really hard. Yeah. But then I realize, you know what? It's going to be just as hard tomorrow and just as hard the day after. And you got to take a look at what you've got. I am blessed with a wonderful wife, beautiful kids, absolutely fantastic friends. Like, my life isn't missing anything because I can't walk. So that's where I choose to put my focus. And that's what I choose to make my life all about.
I've got one more question. It's a little bit lighter subject. I've worked the last 10 to 15 years of my career in durable medical equipment. So I'm very familiar with what the power chairs and ATPs or, so on and so forth. Is it Pride or Invacare for you? Do you prefer a brand and I really mean this, like as a 20-year power chair user, a lot of our listeners come from that industry, right? Whether they as clinicians or so on and so forth. Like, do you have a preference to the brand or the type of chair? If you don't mind me asking, of course.
I don't mind you asking at all. And I will tell you that it's not Pride, it's not Invacare, it's not Sunrise Medical, which used to be Quickie, if I'm not mistaken. No, I've got a Permobil F5.
Oh, Permobil, the newer comer. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the backstory on that is that I was actually one of the first people. I was at McGee Rehab in Philadelphia, and I was one of the first people to get a Permobil back, 27 years ago.
Whoa.
And
cool. Oh, so you've always been on a Permobil.
so I've always had a Permobil, and I love them. And they have their drawbacks, but just the way that the chair works, I feel like doing anything else would really throw my whole routine off.
Yeah, so for our listeners who aren't so familiar with exactly what we're talking about, some of the choices of these types of equipment make a considerable difference over the years. And I think that Permobil has always been a leader, at least again in my decade-long experience, and continues to invest in not so much just the doohickeys that work with the support of the device, but the real actual device and the way that it works for you. So that's cool to hear. Shout out Permobil.
Yeah, and let me just say that when you are looking at wheelchairs, back 27 years ago, the classic power wheelchair was just a regular manual wheelchair with a motor on it, okay? And so you had the big wheels in the back and the little wheels in the front, and Permobil said, I think that there's a better way to do it. And they have, the big wheels are in the front end. And when I say the big wheels, they're only, 14, 16-inch wheels, but they're putting the big wheels in the front and the little wheels in the back. And what that allows for is now it's much easier to go over curbs and to do all that stuff. And it becomes a front wheel drive chair. And so now when you see power chairs out there that have the bigger wheels in the front or even the bigger wheels in the middle, that's all a result of Permobil's kind of innovations in the whole process.
Groundbreaking stuff. Yeah, for sure. If you really want to learn about something that isn't like a frivolous learn and you have no relative reason to learn about power mobility, I really think it's an interesting subject, especially after listening to your story today, Rob. I really appreciate it.
Listen, I'll just make one quick comment about that. And that is, a lot of people talk about me as being confined to a wheelchair, and I really view it the opposite way. I am totally liberated by my wheelchair. If I didn't have this chair, I would be stuck in bed, and that would be confining. But this chair allows me to get out. And now with COVID, I'm confined by COVID. I don't go out because I don't want to get sick and die. But this wheelchair is what allows me to interact with the world. And so I don't view this wheelchair as a ball and chain. I view this as a vehicle to experience life.
After all of that sound advice today, Rob, that sound advice about the COVID, regardless of whether you use a power chair or not, is something that everybody could learn from these weeks, right? I really do think so.
Definitely.
Yeah. So, hey, just one last question for you. And then, of course, we like to get into shifting how to follow you if you just have a couple more moments. And we ask this question of nearly all guests, or at least the guests that really, really plug into us. If you had an opportunity to say one thing to your 15 or 16-year-old self, one piece of advice, what would it be?
Oh, it would be yourself and figure out who you are and who you want to be and do everything in your power to be that person. And so in that, and I'm sorry, this is a really long answer to the short question, but in that, one of the experiences that I had, this is a story from my Still Falling book. I went to speak at a conference, and it was early on in my career. I think it was like the first paying gig that I had. And I was all excited about it. And I got there, and I go by Rob, but my given name is Robert. And that had been what was on the contract. And so when I got there, my name tag said Bob Oliver. I'm like, oh no, like really? And so, but I wanted to work with the meeting planner again. So I can't tell her like, you messed up my name tag. So okay, let me figure this out. And so I arrive and she's like, oh, you're here. Let me pin it on you for you. And so now I've got this tag that's stuck on me that's got my wrong name. And I'm thinking like, oh, okay, like I'll figure out how to deal with this. Like I literally pull away from the table and there's a guy who's there. He sees the tag and it says speaker on it. And he's like, oh, and he looks at my tag. He's like, it's nice to meet you, Bob. And he says to his friend, he's like, hey, come over here. This is our speaker, Bob. And I'm like,
At this point, yeah, you're Bob now. And now you're Bob.
well, so what I did as soon as I could get away from them, I actually went into like a coat room on the side, and it probably took me 10 minutes to get the name tag unpinned from me, but I took it off. And what to me, that was a powerful message. That is, if someone labels you and they put that label on you and it's not who you really are, as long as you're willing to let that label stick, that's who people think you are. And so be who you are and be willing to say, I don't take whatever label it is that is stuck on me. I will be myself regardless of what that means.
That's great.
Yeah, I'm not following that. I got nothing. I got nothing.
I'm not following that either. What I would like to ask you to do, because I do not want to follow that statement other than perhaps write it down like on the inside of every ball app that I have, is if I want to find you, Rob, and you did a good job today of listing the book and the titles and so on and so forth. I hope that we get an opportunity to have you back as an expert. Some of the things we'll talk about, we'll communicate with that offline, but
Definitely.
What is the best way to find you and to order your books and or any other, components you like to draw our listeners' attention to?
So there's a couple things. Number one, I mentioned my podcast. It's called Learning from Smart People. You can find it wherever podcasts are. That is more geared towards like entrepreneurs and the business side of what I'm doing. But I also have my speaking website. It's yourmotivationalspeaker.com. And that's really simple, because if you're looking for a motivational speaker and you find me, you have officially found your motivational speaker. Okay. Those are the two easy websites where you can find me. My books are on Amazon, and you can get them there. And listen, here's something I'd encourage your listeners to do. On my yourmotivationalspeaker.com website, there is a free download, and I did this 2 years ago. So it's 25 lessons from 25 years. And it's 25 things that I have learned over the 25 years since my injury, that they're little short sentences that may be something that it can help you out as you're going through life too. I learned them the hard way, and I would love to share them with your listeners so that they don't have to go through what I've been through to learn what I've learned.
Cool. We'll be sure to get a link out there for you. I listened to one of your podcast episodes. It was, I think it was a Father's Day episode. It was right around Father's Day with a gentleman named Chris Ippolito. And it was so and I'm not being over dramatic. I guess most of my listeners know that. You don't know that about me. I'm not an over dramatic person, but it was so close to some of the stories that I identify with that I took a second to share it, not only with my wife, but with a couple other people in my world. I think that the way, and they're 30-minute episodes on your show, a little bit shorter form than our show, but there are a few very much so gems in that stack of episodes. Really, really appreciate your podcast a lot. So I'm going to go out and download the 25 things. And I appreciate that, sharing that content with us for sure.
Thanks. It's incredible. Everybody's got something to share. And that's really what I think is the message that I want to everybody to get. And that is, just because you didn't break your neck when you were 21 doesn't mean that you haven't gone through experiences that have taught you so much. And get out there and share your story, share what you've learned, and make the world a better place.
It's phenomenal. Thanks. We are conventioNOT Podcast. If you're listening to this, you already found us. So after you go right now, pause, go follow Rob's podcast on your own podcast channel. We're on the same one. I think we actually use a similar provider. And if you're not following us yet, please do. Rob, really, really a pleasure. Thanks for jumping on and being ready to go. I mean, there was no warm-up time, brother. This is one of my most precious episodes. I hope it doesn't come out. Maybe it'll come out in the video, but that story about your kid interviewing you led some tears into my eyes for sure. Right? That's just part of it. That to me was a cool way to open this. And like I said, I can't believe that it's been more than an hour we've been chatting. Thank you so much.
Well, listen, what I have to say is that every time I go and speak, my kids ask me how it went. And I said, they all clapped at the end. And I don't know if they clapped because they really appreciated what I had to say, or if they were just
Because
happy
I was
that I was
done.
done. Yeah, exactly. So, all your listeners can now breathe a sigh of relief, and whether it's because they've learned something valuable in this, or it's like, yeah, he finally stopped talking. It was a pleasure to be here.
We will definitely be in touch, Rob. We've got a lot more stuff to talk to you about, so it's only a matter of time. You go enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you for giving us so much of it. Again, Rob, it was great to meet you.
Yep. Great to meet you guys too. Thanks.
Have a great day. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. All right, I'm gonna hit end here, and then I think we're done recording.